for a lot of people, it's just hard to physically be in this world when you're very big, whether it's getting on an airplane or having to walk somewhere or stand in a line for an hour. You actually have an inequity of access to life experiences that is, I think, unethical.
My guest today is health futurist Dr. Zayna Khayat, and she's here to unpack what's really behind the rise of obesity. This is a conversation about more than just weight. It's about biology and systems and what the future could look like if we choose to redesign it together. Welcome to Sense Making Conversations. I'm your host, Andrea Sampson. Today I'm joined by health futurist Zayna Khayat to unpack how we got here and what might be next. With the rise of new medical interventions that could dramatically reduce obesity rates, we're standing at the edge of a public health turning point. But this conversation goes far beyond weight loss. We're going to talk about the systems that shape our choices, the science behind these emerging therapies, and the ripple effects this could have on everything from food supply to mental health. If you've ever wondered how health innovation and society intersect, this episode is for you. Welcome to Sense Making Conversations. So here we are, it's 2025. The world is seemingly in massive change and transformation. And we as humans are in massive change and transformation. When you look back over the past 50, 60 years, human bodies have changed a lot. And certainly the way in which we feed ourselves, the nutrition that we look for, how do we get here?
I mean, let's start with where you started. As a species, we've been around, depending on whose study, hundreds of thousands, maybe a million years. Our biology is driven by evolution, which would take a generation before a small change makes us fit better in the current world. And so our evolution is linear and decades per cycle. And you've got a cycle time speed of the evolution of the built environment around us and our food environment on like an exponential curve. And so I feel like we've hit peak bottom point of those two mashups together, particularly around the food that goes into our body for fuel and then the implications it has on a bunch of the things we talked about. And so we're at this point where, depending on the jurisdiction, 10 to 40% of the population is clinically obese, which means they're carrying excess weight that produces a type of fat tissue that secretes things that then messes up your whole biology, and then you're just on a path. So it's not just being overweight or fat. There's a clinical layer to it that links to a bunch of things. But in my world as a health futurist, about 85% of all illness, cardiometabolic, diabetes, respiratory, cancers, is linked to food and obesity. So this is where it starts to get me to take a lot of notice because of a little bit of some of the new developments in the last couple of years.
Certainly when we look at where our health has gone as a species, I mean, there's a bit of a dichotomy happening. On the one hand, we're living longer than we ever have, which is amazing. But on the other hand, we're not as healthy as we ever were. And how do we even explain this? I mean, yes, we have more access to food. We truthfully are feeding ourselves better, but I don't think we're as nutritionally fed as we have been. And so what is it that's happening? Because I think it's one of the things that people just don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, I think more and more, because there's such a conversation around this topic in a way we haven't before. But I would think about two big lenses to your question, and I'll leave the quality of the food. That's second. So the first, though, is the quantity of the food. Our species survived against all odds. Like, we kind of shouldn't be here.
Sure.
And there's probably many times. I think we got as low as 50,000 humans were left at some point, something like that, right?
Wow.
One of the fundamental things we need to survive as a species is our brain has to work. For our brain to work, it needs oxygen, but it needs sugar. And it needs the sugar it needs when it needs it in real time. And it has become an incredible machine to activate any system it has to make sure that brain is going to get the sugar, because the species can't survive if the brain can't survive.
Right.
So one is oxygen. That's why we have two channels to get oxygen, not just one. Our bodies were a little bit too smart for that. But because as a species, we evolved in fits and starts of scarcity, you could go a month without eating. Then you're going to go out and kill that tiger or find the berries or whatever it is. And now you're going to eat. But the default setting is as soon as a morsel of energy comes in, we're saving. It's like a really good financially savvy person who knows to save every penny and only spend what what it needs.
Right.
So now, I just walked down Bloor Street in Toronto. In one block, I have enough calories to sustain my brain and my human body for about 3 years in one block. And before,
Even just 100 years ago.
like 25 years ago,
I think back even to when I was a child, there wasn't the local coffee shop that you could drop by and grab a sandwich and a coffee. Those things, they were around, but they just weren't as plentiful.
not as available. And so that's one aspect of the volume of food is we are wired to, as soon as we find calories, get them because our body wants to store them. Like it has no idea because tomorrow, biologically speaking, we could have famine for another 6 months. So that's one. Then when we have excess calories available, it's like take more, take more, take more. And we have instinctual drives to consume as much calories as we can to store them for a rainy day. And then to the extent those calories are highly palatable, a lot of good sugar because our brain's fuel is mostly sugar. Wow, are we going to want those? And then you've got these loops. So that's kind of one part about the volume of food that doesn't match the energy expenditure because we just don't expend that much energy for what we're taking in because we're storing it for later. But also the cost of energy to acquire food before was very, very high. You had to go fishing, you had to go hunting, you had to do the agriculture. So it did at least offset some of the availability when the agrarian age came and we had, mass produced agriculture. But then we get to what's in the food. And I would call a lot of what's ingested today food-like substances. I don't think it meets the definition of food because when it's full of, sugar, salt,
What would be an example of that? Just to kind
a
of,
bag of potato chips, there's no food in that.
right.
That's purely chemistry. And a bag of potato chips has some potato, but everything else is chemistry, right? So the thing about that is, again, from a biology system, we evolved over a million years to first get the brain ready for the food by how we chew it, the smells, what our tongue is feeling. Enzymes are starting to work on it in the mouth. It's supposed to go through a pretty long process through our esophagus and everything, secrete messages. This is coming, fat's coming, sugar's coming, whatever. And then, oh, we're full, our stomach's full, tells the brain stop eating. Like that was a process, takes a time to eat and needs food that went through the clock speed of metabolism. Well, you eat a Kit Kat bar, you've just went through that whole thing I just said in a time that our brain will never catch up. So that's where then the overconsumption adds more. And then the quality of the food, which isn't really food, sets off signals in our body, which tricks all the wiring. And then we'll get into what that leads to. So you could just see there's just a lot of factors at the same time. In climate, we go pre-1990 as our target for getting the carbon levels.
Yep.
I'd say we're trying to get back to pre-1970s. Before the 70s, you kind of ate in the morning, you ate at lunch, and you ate 5:30. And that's it. You never ate again.
One of my other clients that I work with, Janet Olmsted, she's an expert in play, actually, but she talks a lot about movement. And I remember at one point, she showed me this amazing chart, which showed the levels of inactivity by year. We were having a decrease in activity from about the 50s. The electric stove was introduced. That started to be an inactivity. Then when the electric washer was introduced. These are all things that we did. Like if you think about how hard it was to live, where inactivity hit a maximum was when computers were introduced. So to your point, here we are, we're consuming more calories because we have more access to them. We're consuming food-like substances that really our body is like, wow, this is giving me the things I need, but I don't even know when I'm full. So therefore, there is no mechanism to stop us. And our lifestyle has changed such that we don't have an energy expenditure to actually
Offset
use the food or the calories that were designed to keep us moving. So where are we? How is the current healthcare system even treating the idea of obesity and of this inactivity offset to it?
It's not like anyone in medicine, in any aspect of it, is being like, well, what do we do? Like there have been attempts for decades to overcome this. within medicine around coaching, around diet, around movement, and those kinds of things. In parallel, of course, policies around the food guide and required annual physical activity as it became a policy that had to be required in school and all that, not just for obesity management, but for a bunch of things. So it's just the pace at which we can evolve our genes is linear and the pace of society changing is
Right.
exponential. Those policy or practice interventions have not kept up with the pace of obesity incidence until these last few years with these
Right. Because
GLP-1
we've seen, I
medications.
mean, if we look at, let's say, the last 10 years, where we've seen probably the biggest uptick in obesity, I would think. Society's view of it has been something it stigmatizes, it makes people feel shameful. The message that's often sent is this is your fault.
Yeah.
Doctors will withhold medications and interventions with the claim of just lose weight. And it creates this burden on the individual. What I'm hearing is that we've got a healthcare system burdened by something that it doesn't have the ability to keep up with because it's moving so fast. We've got individuals who are burdened with a sense of shame and stigma. And so these two things, I would think, are creating a problem and a systems level opportunity because both have to be addressed.
100%. This is about systems. It's not about individuals. And by the way, you get to obesity because your metabolic systems, your hormone, there's a bunch of them, are off whack because of everything we talked about. None of that had to do with choices you made,
Yeah.
almost none of it. If
That's
when you have
even
thyroid imbalance, it
right.
doesn't manifest as obesity. It manifests in many other terrible things, but nobody will question
Yeah.
what needs to be done to fix that. Nobody will question if your body stops making insulin, that you need to inject insulin and we stop you from dying of this disease called type 1 diabetes. But this shame and this thing as if it was the individual when it's the system. But this is going through a transition, Andrea, as we speak. So I think it's so timely
Yeah.
that you're having this conversation.
Well, I just want to add one more thing to that conversation, which is, as women, and a certain point in our lives, we stop making certain hormones. It's just taken for granted. Oh, it's the middle age spread. It's the 50 at 50. And these are things that I think we're starting to challenge. Even in the last 2, 3 years, I've learned so much about my own body. And there are a lot of medical interventions out there. And I know that doctors are offering patients new medical interventions that work. We've all heard of the Ozempic face. Um,
Oz or Ozzy.
yeah, like whatever you want to call it. Look, I remember my mother, I mean, this was in the 70s, taking weight loss drugs, right? I mean, even in those days, it was there. But the ones that we have today seem to work better. I think they know more. There's lots of hype about them, but are they actually giving us hope?
I would say in this case they are. Let's just step back a bit and understand what's going on. So in obesity itself in the medical world has transitioned to be classified as a disease. No
Mhm.
different from cancer, Alzheimer's, pick a disease. So that is a leap.
Like, that's a
Yeah.
really important point. Obesity has been now classified by the medical system as a disease.
Disease.
It's not something that I've done to myself. It is something that has happened
Yeah.
to me.
To me. If you had a disease called a UTI infection, there's a prescription that we found. Thank you, medicine. Thank you very much to make it very quick to clear it up, right? And this is saying there is now prescribable medications to manage this disease in a way that we didn't have before that are quite efficacious, like they deliver results with side effects that can be managed for many people. And, there's a whole bunch of them out there. So that's for the health outcomes. Part of why, though, I think this is relevant to your audience and to the kind of conversation you have is where you started is the sociological implications of carrying excess weight. And many are what you talked about, shame, hiding because of the narratives from the 80s and the 90s, the Kate Moss, which, as we know, they're going through a change, but again, not at this pace at obesity had been going on.
Right.
But also for a lot of people, it's just hard to physically be in this world when you're very big, whether it's getting on an airplane or having to, walk somewhere or stand in a line for an hour. You actually have an inequity of access to life experiences that is, I think, unethical. And so we owe it to also address an upside that isn't even medical. It leads to a big society participation when you have 40% of people obese, this has got huge implications. It's like at a COVID level of isolation implications.
There is a lot of talk about what I know are, they call them GLP-1 antagonists.
Yeah.
How do they work? What is that?
So, glucagon like peptide, GLP, the science of it, the discovery of what it does came right out of Canada. Dr. Dan Drucker, he's an endocrinologist scientist
Yeah,
at Mount
I just
Sinai.
interviewed him actually a
Oh,
couple
did
of weeks,
you?
yeah,
Yeah, like,
last
I mean,
week.
this is his incredible basic science, and
Yeah.
I remember he was a boyfriend of mine's physician who had diabetes back in the day, so also seeing patients in the clinic that then got developed by pharma, and it took a while, it's been his life's work to now develop these agonists, and again, I'm not a scientist or a doctor, but in general, that can tackle the issues where GLP-1 has a hormone, which are linked to the signaling with the brain about fullness, which then you can't eat more. You know when you're stuffed,
Yes.
you could have the most important food that you love, that you dream, you cannot put another morsel in your mouth. So it just tricks the brain to thinking you're in that situation. And just now with the way the dosing is done, you can kind of do one injection on a Monday, and the way it circulates in the body lasts for about a week for some of them, and some are different, but the potency is there all week. So it really has a good effect every day because we're confronted with food like substances pretty much every waking minute of the day.
Mhm.
So you kind of need that because again, your biology is telling you, oh my goodness, donut, suck that in right now. And that's kind of a bit of what's been going on, which now your consumption is down. And then, again, I'm not an expert, but I listen to a lot about this. It seems that it's not really, okay, now I'm eating less so I lose weight or I eat better and give my body what it needs to nourish itself, but it just creates space
Mm.
to let you do the things you've been trying to work on. For me, by the way, I've been overweight for a very long time. For years, use it like on the side while my biology's been working against me. It just takes that away. Some say it takes away the chatter.
This idea of space, it's something I've been exploring a lot. Through these conversations, it seems that every expert that I talk to through different lenses, we keep coming back to this place of slowing down. We can't go any faster because fast food, like, look, it was invented as we got busier, right? I don't have time to sit down and take a full hour for lunch. I just need the 5 minutes to throw something in my mouth to keep myself going. And then that thing that I threw into my mouth became a food-like substance that my body said more, more, more because it didn't know I was full.
100%. And not just the sensation of full. Also around, again, what we've heard, and I personally have been through this journey, so I can vouch as an N of one patient, is we've all been wanting to make the choices of food that are consistent with a healthy life, but it's so hard because of all these things that when you just take that noise away, your body knows what it wants. So you can hear it again. You can hear
Mm.
it choose the, nutritious food that hasn't been processed because that's what it actually wants. Because eating processed food is a bit inconsistent with what your body needs to thrive.
So am I hearing you telling me that I'm going to be craving Brussels sprouts?
Maybe not craving, because craving kind of goes away.
Mm.
It's just that when you're given a food choice, you'll have space to choose foods that help you thrive
Right. Right.
versus the messages before, which is suck those calories in and save them for a rainy day.
Right. So really what we're doing is we're shifting what I would call the come from place of our body. We're no longer coming from a place of lack, right? Like our whole existence as humans, because we ate what we killed, we were always in a place of lack. Food comes, eat it, store it. Our body became the storage mechanism for the food that we were able to get in the moment because we may not see food for another month or week or however long. But we're not in lack anymore. We're not in that place. And so our body has to adjust. And we've never been able to interact with our body in a way that helped it to understand that food is always, as far as we can tell, available to us. We have the ability now as humans, which we never had the ability to before, to create food when we need it, to materialize it literally out of thin air. I mean, I remember working with some scientists at Singularity in the Nordics, and they were looking at, literally creating, they were using
Tempeh, was it?
mycelium.
Yeah,
the
mycelium. Yeah.
mycelium, and so mushrooms and being able to grow food from the air. And so our body has to catch up.
Yep, and science has helped with that. And again, it's not 100% of the population all the time. And there's one line of hypothesis. Like I kind of look at me and say my partner, who came from a lineage of kind of from Europe, Scottish farmers, maybe 4 generations ago to Canada, multiple generations of farmers, very lean. He could eat a donut and his body metabolizes and it's all done, and he wouldn't crave the donut. He wouldn't think about the donut. Me, if I eat the donut right to my thigh right away, and I want more and I want more. So what is it? Well, I'm from an Arabic lineage in the Middle East where there were severe famines and
Right.
scarcity. And the only reason my genes survived maybe 4 generations ago is because it could store a little bit of fat.
Right. It had this,
Everyone else died.
right.
So just giving ourselves some grace that there is some biology here that is why someone is very, very thin and lean and you're not, it's not you at all, right?
For
It's
sure.
just where it gets more is the environment you were born in that changed your biology from birth. Stress, a lot of sugar, and then now your metabolism is done. So you have two things working against you. Your biology of your genes, some of us wants to store immediately, and it's really good at it. And then the other is what you did for the first 10 or 20 years of your life ruined all the circuitry. And now GLP-1s are one example of a tool that can overcome both of those.
Now, I know when we look at anything that is, created through pharmaceuticals, they tend to create obviously a new opportunity, but they're often quite expensive. Are we creating a two-tiered system here where some have access, those people who can afford to get these things will be able to manage and excel. But what about if you're in that other class where you just simply can't afford these drugs?
So they definitely are quite pricey and not accessible, both because of affordability, but why that is they're not covered fully for obesity management. A lot of these medications, it's called a label or what
Yes.
they're
Yeah.
allowed to be reimbursed for by either your government insurer, if you've got a publicly funded system, or your private health insurer. It's not allowed for some conditions, some it is. And so even if you've got clinical obesity and it likely will work, you can't get it paid for through your
Mm.
insurance plan in a lot of cases. So you
So
have you pay out of pocket or you can't. They're in the hundreds of dollars a month, and you have to be on them for some people forever, and for others there could be a period of time, but they work really well. Okay. Here's what I think his name is Dr. Sharma from British Columbia. At the World Obesity Day, there was a big summit held probably all over the world. I went to the one in Canada a few weeks ago when that question came up. So I'll just give his answer, which I thought was, I'm like, yeah, that's the answer. Is anytime a new medication that has kind of blockbuster effects comes out, it's very, very expensive at the beginning. Then every pharma company piles on and wants to get in on the action, and then price drops.
what I just heard you say is that this is a systems issue. We've got a system right now that's looking at these drugs that were helping some of the side effects, quite frankly, of obesity, diabetes, these sorts of things, right? And at least they were originally designed for these things. And because we saw obesity as something that you did to yourself and not something that happens to you, there wasn't any interest in creating some form of an intervention that was at a systems level. Private companies could do it. Sure, we can sell it to you, but not at a systems level. But I think what I'm hearing you say is that there is the system is catching up to the problem.
The mental model is not yet caught up to the fact that it's actually
Right.
happened, but it's happening. And because the results of people who take these treatments have been so good, clinicians are now waking up to it, right? They're
Right.
like, well, so just like menopause, I find that's another area.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's half our population.
The
Um,
unexplored frontier.
yeah. So I just find those two areas, everyday primary care pharmacists, they're really getting way more caught up on managing them in a very different way than just deal with it for menopause and
Yeah.
exercise more and eat less for obesity. So that's why you said, is it hyper hope, Andrea? I rarely have a lot of hope in the area of medicine and healthcare where I am because I see so many intractable systemic challenges.
Yes.
I have a lot of hope around this area.
So let's say we live in a world where these interventions, because I'm not going to call them drugs because I think they're different than a drug. They're an intervention. And they're helping our brain to shift and change the way in which it acts within our body. So as we shift and change and our body changes and our behavior changes, we'll start to see, hopefully, a decline in these obesity rates. What do you think that's going to do to our food system and our healthcare
Yeah.
and even like urban planning? Like it's going to have some unintended consequences, I would think.
So now we get to why I wanted to do this topic is because I'm a futurist. So I
Yes.
start at your question now going forward is my life's work. Everything we've talked about today, please, everyone, I am not the expert. There are some incredible experts and I'm happy to share, but I've tried to hopefully do honor to their great work and thinking. Okay, so as a futurist, that's what my job is what are the
Mhm.
signals? What are the signs? How might these signals play out? And I've
Yeah.
been thinking about this one a lot. So, one signal there are reports already that food consumption of processed foods in the US has gone down because of these medications.
Wow.
Okay, like at a
Wow.
macro to be able to actually measure a dent
Yeah.
in whatever Walmart's aisle of food. So that's one signal that play it
That's
out.
interesting. Yeah.
That's really interesting. So it starts to change. So that's one system. The whole food production system, what your Nabiscos and all them of the world are making and selling. The demand side of that is now gone an inflection point, at least in the curve. And we haven't had that since the 1970s. It's been on a
Wow.
okay. It's.
Yeah.
So that's one. The other area, and I'm when I'm back into health. Another one I think about is things like travel and moving around and cars and seat belts and airplanes and the ability to move in the world and get where you want to participate fully in
Mhm.
the world,
Yeah.
I think is going to open up a bunch of opportunity. Kind of like what mental health medications did for a lot of people who
Right.
we
Who were
put them
just
in sanatoriums.
right. Yep. Well, and then you look at that and you go, do you have like hospital visits? I'm thinking would go down. So you're
Yeah, so
starting
now
to
we get to healthcare demand,
yeah.
right? Yeah, so now you have all the implications of excess weight and then again adiposity that secretes bad things on your primary diseases, diabetes, cardiometabolic, so heart failure and sometimes indirectly stroke. And then your kind of second order cancer, some portions of Alzheimer's, 30 to 40% is what we call vascular.
Wow.
Maybe you don't eliminate those, but you really do reduce like the speed at which they appear, the severity. And then when you get on treatment courses in any of those, and then when you're now eating good, nutritious food, it makes a huge difference to restoring health.
Well, and then with that, the demand for food goes down because our body is saying, "Oh, I'm satiated. I don't need any more." Our desire for higher quality food because the body is like, "But no, I need vitamins, I need nutrition. So don't give me that other stuff. Here's the thing I need." And so our body is now looking for those things to help us get better. Maybe disease load goes down, but when we start looking at agriculture and farming, the impact on climate, the like suddenly you start to go like, do we need as much food as we have? If we're no longer creating these food-like substances because people don't want them, these are fast food, these are throwaway items that consume tons and tons and tons of produce and like what it takes to
Packaging.
make these things, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
transporting them, all the marketing and sales around them because it's a marketing and sales game. There's no quality difference between this brand of potato chips
Right.
and that brand of potato chips. Whereas there is a quality difference on a whole food. Strawberries that had to travel 25 days to get to you and be sprayed and genetically modified versus what you could maybe grow in your own hydroponic kit.
Right. Right.
There is going to be a new shift of where the food is made and how it moves and all that, let alone with tariffs.
Well, and what you're just describing too, it starts to bring us back into almost a communal environment where we move to this factory farming model because there are billions of people on earth and we needed to be able to feed everybody and we needed to have these massive food creation systems to be able to keep up with the demand. But if we start to now impact that demand in a way that says, well, our body actually doesn't need it or want it. we no longer are buying it, so demand goes away. But what we really want is quality. And the only way to truly get the quality that our body, it sounds like, will at some point want is to be able to go to my backyard and pull the carrots out of the ground or go to the community garden. I love this because I think history is cyclical. Right? We are cyclical beings. And it's not that we relive the way we were, we come back to the things that work with new knowledge and new capabilities. And so are we pulling the carrots out of the ground in the same way we did 100, 200, 500 years ago? Probably not. But we're still probably pulling the carrots out of the ground.
Yeah, yeah. Or we're growing the carrots in 3 dimension in the air, like your mushrooms.
Yeah,
There is
yeah.
no ground. And that's okay too, but it's still carrots because our biology was developed based on
Right.
eating the food in our local
And
environment.
maybe
So,
they're actually more nutritionally dense
yeah,
because of
yep,
what we've been able to do from a knowledge standpoint in the way in which we're growing them.
agree. So I'd say though, for me, the biggest implication I'm trying to work on, and I just did a futures exercise on this topic yesterday with my MBA students, is play it out. If obesity related, and let's just say obesity related disease goes back to what I call pre 1970s levels, you can start to model out what the implications are on demand for healthcare, on,
Yeah.
like you said, hospitalization, life extension, by the
Mhm.
way,
I was also thinking insurance.
insurance, and yeah, for sure, ability to get it in the first place, ability to get life insurance.
Yeah.
So that's what we do, right? That's what we do as
Right.
futures. We map out second order, third order, fourth order, and then you see the whole system. And you can just be a little bit smarter no matter who you are. If you're a Frito Lay Corporation, if you're the government, if you're a pharma company, if you're a transport taxi company, what choices do I have to start to make today, or investments or bets that are consistent with this unfolding future? And that's what
Mm.
we do in futurism. I just think this one is a big one.
Yeah, like as we're talking, as we're exploring, as we're going deep, I mean, the thing that really is coming clear for me is that obesity, this thing that has been prevalent in our world for a very long time, more prevalent over the past 10, 15 years, something that has been filled with shame and blame, that has been kept hidden by many. And in some cases, those who are affected by it fight back to be accepted into our society. And what we're saying now is okay, well, if we just stop, first of all, just stop all that craziness and we recognize just like cancer, just like heart disease, this is a disease. And when we accept that, and we have the ability to impact that disease, it could literally change our entire world, our entire society.
I agree.
Mm.
Non-communicable diseases are now the number one burden of illness in developing economies. It used to always be communicable, right? Get the
Right.
dengue fever or the no, they're starting because they're modernizing. Like they're going through a cycle of everything you just said as we get out of
Yeah.
agrarian, and the human biology is not designed for this obesogenic environment. And so we're starting to see it in the low, medium income. So you're right. It is the whole world.
And and so would you say this is a root cause of some of the challenges that we have in our world today?
I don't know. It's a good hypothesis. I don't know if I have an answer to that. I usually give you my answers, Andrea, and you ask very hard questions. From what I hear, what I see, what do others say? I haven't heard that conversation, but it doesn't mean it's not happening. Right? It's an interesting. I like we should be looking for at that because that's not what people are talking about. But what I will say is we might back into it. So there's a scientist named Dr. Eric Topol. He's kind of a global international thought leader on the future of medicine, future of care. And he picks certain topics that he's like, this is going to be a very fundamental shift in all of medicine and health. One is AI. The other is COVID. What's the people who have long COVID? That's a
Mm,
whole area of science he is obsessed with.
wow.
And the third is the data that's coming out of people who take these GLP-1 agonists
Interesting.
around, like another paper got published for this disease, for that disease.
Right.
Oh, it's solving world peace. All of us, like we're running a big world clinical trial, and so we're getting answers to these things that we didn't even think was the right question because the data is telling us. So it's going to be really interesting to start to see as more people get on these with more duration, these next layer of implications. And then we'll get to what does having excess obesity, excess adiposity, what does it actually do to us as humans?
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I'm curious
The
about.
science is coming, girl.
Oh, I can't wait. Zaina, whenever you and I start talking, like we could talk all day, but I know that we were going to have to land this. So I want to bring it back. First of all, thank you. This has been a fascinating conversation, and I think you've really opened up a lot for us. But I want to pass it back to you and say, look, what's one thing you want to leave our listeners with, and how can our listeners stay in touch with you?
I mean, I can leave a lot of things. Maybe there's one I do want to leave because it is quite pervasive. And just to remind people to have some grace for the reasons I said about there are evolutionary factors at play here that are way beyond your control. This is not an individual issue, it's a system issue, but also have some grace for this. When your body stores the fat, it finds the places to put it that actually are the safest for your body
Oh,
because it's trying to help you. Your body is always helping you. It's storing it because it wants to help you for a raining day. It's choosing to put it on your thighs, your stomach, your breasts, that little section over here, because actually that's the safest place. Because if it puts it on your heart or on your liver or on your kidney, you won't survive as a
mhm.
species. It doesn't put it in your brain. We don't get fat here. So just have some grace that when you have this, it's your body is helping you. Your body's incredible.
Right.
So that's just the one thing I want to leave people with.
Yeah.
And that now we've got a tool to me that's no different from, remember polio? When people had polio, they were in those big iron,
Yes. Oh my goodness, the
we had
iron lung, yeah.
football fields for
Yes,
life. They were in the
correct.
iron chamber.
Yes,
One medical intervention came out called the polio vaccine,
right.
and that whole thing was gone. And now we can move on and talk about other things in life. So that's the promise, I think. And you've played out the second and third order implications on multiple parts of society. That whatever listener area that's you, maybe you think about it a little bit differently given the speed at which these medications are becoming available.
Zena, you've given us so much to think about. I mean, everything from here, we have choice in terms of how we use these interventions and choosing to recognizing that these are things that will become more ubiquitous as time goes on, as our systems catch up to the fact that obesity is not something that happens to us, but a disease that our body that gets developed because of the way we have evolved as humans and the way in which our systems around us have changed our metabolism and our ability to exist within society. And so it's not about shame and it's not about hiding. It's about recognizing we have tools, we have ability, and also to have the grace that says, look, we've got these incredible bodies that carry us around every day, that do the best that they can for us. And if we've got a little jiggle here or a wobble there, maybe
You
have
say,
a
thank
little.
you, body. Thank you for
Yes,
putting it there and not in a bad place.
exactly. Exactly. Thank you, Zaina. This has been incredibly powerful. Where can my guests stay in touch with
Yeah,
you?
so I'm on LinkedIn, Zayna Khayat. You can find the spelling. That's my primary. I've been trying to dabble in blue sky since I ditched the bird or the X or whatever, but I'm not getting my mojo yet there. So maybe soon, but I am on blue sky as well at Zayna
Yeah.
Khayat.
And if you want this incredible woman to come speak at one of your events, I happen to know firsthand she's incredible and is very in demand. We happen to represent Zaina. So feel free to reach out at any point if you would like her to come and speak at one of your events. She is incredible and will blow your audience away. Thank you, Zaina. This has been incredible. What Zaina helps us see is that for too long, obesity has been viewed as a moral failing. But when we shift that lens, that obesity is actually a disease, complex, biologically driven, that changes everything. When we shift our perception from obesity as a moral failing to a disease, the door opens not just to new medical treatments, but to new kinds of empathy, new conversations, even new systems. We stop blaming people. We start asking better questions. And when we do that, the world will begin to look different, where obesity is finally seen and treated because it's understood for what it is. From food systems to mental health to public policy and personal dignity. This shift could reshape more than just healthcare. It could reshape how we care, period. If this conversation gave you a new lens, make sure you share it. And don't forget, subscribe. We've got so many more conversations to explore. This has been Sense Making Conversations, and I'm Andrea Sampson. And I'll meet you right back here at our next conversation.